Hi, I'm Jingwei from Research Center Jülich in Germany. It is a great opportunity to talk in this symposium at OHBM this year. In my talk, I would like to focus on the fairness of machine learning models across different ethnic groups when predicting behavior measures from fMRI brain imaging data. In recent years, machine learning has been given great hope to design systems for precision medicine. For example, machine learning models have been used to predict the development of Alzheimer's disease. And beyond neurological disorders, it has been used to identify new biomarkers for disease such as diabetes and to determine the effectiveness of treatment or to identify drug-sensitive targets for better treatment effect. We may narrow down the application scenario into neuroimaging-related research. Machine learning models can be built to classify patients with mental disorders from healthy people. They can also be used to predict a large set of behavioral phenotypes from brain imaging data, which has become a significant research interest recently. By doing reverse engineering, people can determine which brain regions or imaging features are more important for predicting a certain behavior measure or a disease. Hence, there's a possibility to identify potential neurobiomarkers for them. However, in many machine learning applications, people have observed biases in predicted target variables that were against the minority group. For example, a study showed that many commercial gender classification systems generated a higher accuracy in favor of lighter-skinned males than the contrast. Imagine such systems to be applied to detect suspects. A worse misclassification rate in darker-skinned females could lead to higher possibility to identify the wrong suspects in this subpopulation, which is a severe societal risk. The reasons of such bias could be that there wasn't enough data for minority groups for the models to learn. It could be easier for the models to fit more to majority group during optimization. It could also be that machine learning models may learn from previous discrimination caused by societal reasons, for example, gender inequality in indices of professional success. Given this context, a natural question would be, are the machine learning models used for predicting behavior measures from neuroimaging data, in particular functional connectivity data, also biased against a minority population? Especially currently in this research area, people usually train models on a mixture of subpopulations, which was mostly dominated by white or European descendant population. To study this question, we used two large-scale public datasets from the US, which have been intensively used for brain-based behavior prediction. The Human Connectome Project, HCP, and the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development, ABCD cohort. The HCP data contains about 1,000 young healthy adults with 58 behavior measures examined, whereas the ABCD data contains around 5,000 of pre-adolescent participants with 36 behavior measures. Both of them were dominated by white Americans in sample size. And we would like to see if predictive models perform equally well in white Americans and in a minority ethnic group, for example, African Americans. Each dataset was analyzed separately. One thing to be noted here is that we used self-reported ethnicity or race. Therefore, different categories represent which culture and community the participants think they belong to. We used the SFX pre-processed fMRI data for the HCP dataset. On top of that, we regressed global signal from fMRI time series. For the ABCD dataset, we basically followed the same pre-processing steps as in another paper from our colleagues. Starting from minimally pre-processed data, the fMRI images were aligned with T1 image. We did motion sensory, new sensory regression with global signal regression, interpolated the sensor frames, did bandpass filtering, and finally transformed the fMRI images to preserve FSRH6 space. For both datasets, functional connectivity was computed across the 400 area Schiffer population and 19 subcortical regions. We built kernel-rich regression models to predict behavioral phenotypes from resting state functional connectivity of individual brains. We trained and tested our predictive models in a cross-validated way. Each time, the training was performed on a mixture of all ethnic groups, following how a model is usually trained in this field. Then we tested models on African Americans and white Americans who are matched in certain demographic, anthropological, and behavioral variables. For each behavioral measures, we compared the predictive coefficient of determination, COD, which is inversely related to mean squared error between the two groups. In this figure, the vertical axis represents predictive COD, horizontal axis represents different behavioral measures. COD of African American is indicated by blue veiling here. COD of African American is indicated by green veiling. Red veiling indicates how much higher was the COD of white Americans than that of African American, and gray veiling represents the null distribution of the difference. The star above means the difference was significant. In the HCB dataset, we observed that for most behavior measures, white Americans enjoy lower prediction error compared to African Americans. And it is also true using the ABCD dataset. Similar conclusion can be drawn when using linear regression to build models or when controlling for different confounding variables. The COD accuracy metric does not show to which direction was the prediction off compared to the original behavioral scores. Therefore, we looked into the value of predicted score minus original score for each group and each behavior measures. This difference between predicted and original behavioral score is represented by the vertical axis of each subplot. Every subplot corresponds to a single behavior measure. We use the same color code as before, so blue and green correspond to African Americans and white Americans separately. Looking into individual behavior measures, we spotted some prediction biases that could be worrisome. Here, I just show you one example. In the ABCD dataset, we found that African American children were more over-predicted in rule-breaking behavior, aggressive behavior, etc. Such behavior aspects can be used for a mental disorder diagnosis. Overestimation in these behavior measures could lead to more false positives in diagnosis. Since the datasets were dominated by white Americans, we investigated if changing the training population could help to reduce bias. We trained models only on African Americans and only on randomly selected white Americans with the same sample size and on both of them. Again, for each type of model, we tested it on independent African American and white Americans. In this figure, the vertical axis corresponds to the three types of models I mentioned before. The horizontal axis will show how many behavior measures exhibit higher or lower prediction accuracy in test white Americans than African Americans. Navy blue indicates the number of behavior measures that the model achieved higher accuracy in white Americans than African Americans. Light teal color indicates the other way around. Gray color means the accuracy difference was not significant. By comparing across the three types of models, we found that training only African Americans indeed corresponded to the fewest number of behavior measures with lower accuracy in tests of African Americans than white Americans. It means that changing the training population to only African Americans indeed helped it to reduce some prediction bias against African American. However, focusing on the model trained only on African Americans, there was still much more behavioral measures with a better prediction accuracy in white Americans than African Americans. Therefore, composition of training population could not fully explain the model bias. Since the models trained on different subpopulations generated different results, we were curious whether what the models learned from differently from different training samples. Following a previous work from Hoffa et al., we estimated the brain behavior association learned by a model as the covariance between the functional connectivity data and the predicted behavioral scores across training participants. For each behavior measures, we plotted the brain behavior associations of model learned from only African Americans or from only white Americans separately. For each type of model, we plot the positive and negative associations separately. A positive association means that the model thinks that higher functional connectivity between a specific pair of regions corresponds to a higher behavior score. A negative association means that the model learned that higher functional connectivity corresponds to a lower behavior score. The brain behavior association in each case is represented by a chord diagram. Different nodes around the circle correspond to different brain networks. Arcs connecting any two networks represent the association of functional connectivity between these two networks with the behavior measure currently under investigation. Then we can obtain a chord diagram per behavior measure, per type of training population, and for positive and negative associations separately. Although the patterns that models learn from the two groups share a lot of similarities, we also observed several obvious differences. Here I show you one example. Look at the second column. When models are trained only on African Americans, we observed a strong negative association between visual A limbic B functional connectivity and behavioral measures such as lung delivery cord. However, this pattern was not shown in the last column when models are trained only on white Americans. In contrast, the model learned a slightly positive association from white Americans, shown in the third column. In summary, we have observed worse behavioral prediction accuracy in African Americans than white Americans generated by machine learning models using two large-scale datasets. Looking into direction of prediction errors, problematic conclusions against the interest of African American could be drawn if the model predictions are adopted uncritically. We altered the composition of training sample and indeed found that training specifically on African Americans could reduce part of the prediction bias against African Americans. But there was still a large portion of bias remained that could not be eliminated by simply changing the training sample. There could be many reasons leading to this bias. From the imaging side, from the imaging data set, since long time ago, preprocessing strategies have been optimized on samples that were dominated by white or European descendant population. For example, the current widely used brain templates and functional atlases were derived mostly based on white population. On the other side, the current standard behavior measures or tools face the same issue. The validity of these tests on minority groups is also questionable. Furthermore, we have observed different patterns in brain behavior association that the model learned from different groups. However, this difference cannot be interpreted as neurobiological or neuropsychological differences between these two groups. It is because during data collection, processing, and analysis, there are so many steps that could introduce historical or artificial bias into the data and further be learned by machine learning models. By the end of this talk, I would like to advocate the importance of collecting more data from minority groups. In this study, we studied the prediction bias against African Americans. However, there are other groups that are even minorly represented in the dataset, the sample size of which is far from enough to analyze. Furthermore, although we focused on African Americans here, the results cannot be simply generalized to Africans in Africa. The culture, language, and diet, and so on between them have been deviated from each other for a long time. Not only the number of subjects in each group matters, the definition of ethnic categories also matters. In the context of the US society, Chinese and India are classified together as Asian. However, they are quite different in culture, religion, and language. We should also be aware that problem happen using the US datasets could also happen in other countries. For example, recently there have been a few large-scale neural imaging datasets being collected in China. Usually datasets collected in China focus on Chinese Han, but we should try the best to make sure that the minority ethnicities are not ignored or understudied. Minority groups are not only limited in the context of ethnicity. For example, it could also be people from lower social class. I should also reiterate that this study aims to promote fairness of future application of artificial intelligence across populations. On the contrary, people should not naively draw any conclusion on neurobiological, neurocognitive differences across groups. Ethnicity or race is such a complex concept. It is much influenced by historical and societal factors. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention.